The battle for Altair system raged for 8 hours, turning the entire star system into the largest graveyard in galactic history. Ships from both sides exploded in brilliant flashes that could be seen from neighboring systems, while debris clouds expanded outward, creating new hazards for surviving vessels. The space between planets became littered with twisted metal frozen bodies and the wreckage of dreams of conquest. Colonel Yoon Seo-jun commanded a wing of heavy cruisers that specialized. In close quarters combat, his ships were built like floating fortresses designed to get within point-blank range of enemy vessels and tear them apart with massive guns. The Kralix had never faced opponents willing to fight at such close range, where their long-distance weapons became useless. The human cruisers moved through the battlefield like armored predators seeking out the largest enemy ships they could find. When they found a target, they would accelerate to ramming speed, then veer aside at the last second, while unleashing devastating broadsides that could crack a dreadnought hull in half. The Kralix crews had no training for this kind of warfare, and many panicked when human ships appeared to be about to ram them. Captain Lim Ye-jin piloted the experimental stealth destroyer Ghost of Gangnam, which could appear and disappear at will during the heat of battle. Her ship would materialize behind enemy formations, launch a barrage of quantum torpedoes that could track targets across vast distances, then vanish again before return fire could reach her position. The Ghost of Gangnam became a legend during the battle, as Kralix crews reported being attacked by a ship that seemed to exist only when it was killing them. Their sensors would detect the vessel for a few seconds during its attack run, then lose all contact until the next devastating strike. Enemy commanders began to think they were fighting some kind of supernatural force. Admiral Therion watched helplessly from his flagship as his mighty fleet was systematically destroyed by human forces that seemed to be everywhere at once. His tactical displays showed Kralix ships exploding faster than his staff could update the battle reports. The humans were not just winning, they were completely dominating opponents who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. The turning point came when Admiral Bang personally led a suicide charge against the Kralix flagship, Spirit of Incheon. His ship had taken heavy damage during the fighting, but its weapons and engines still functioned. Bang ordered all power, diverted to the main drive, and aimed his vessel directly at Admiral Therion Command Center. The Kralix flagship tried desperately to shoot down the incoming human ship, but Spirit of Incheon armor had been designed to survive exactly this kind of concentrated fire. The human vessel plowed through defensive fire like it was flying through empty space, its hull glowing red-hot from energy beam impacts. But still accelerating toward its target, Bang's ship smashed through the Kralix flagship shields and buried itself deep in the enemy hull before exploding with the force of a small star. The blast vaporized the entire command section, killing Admiral Therion and his entire senior staff instantly. Without their legendary commander, the Kralix fleet lost all coordination and began fighting as individual ships instead of a unified force. Colonel Yoon Seo-jun led the final assault against the remaining enemy vessels. His heavy cruisers formed a battle line that advanced steadily across the battlefield, destroying everything in their path. The few Kralix ships that tried to surrender found that their communication systems had been so badly damaged by human jamming that they could not send clear signals. Some enemy captains attempted desperate ramming attacks against human vessels, but even these final acts of defiance failed, as Earth-built ships simply moved out of the way with reflexes faster than Kralix computers could calculate. The aliens had trained for centuries to fight opponents who moved and thought like they did, but humans were completely unpredictable. Captain Lim Ye-jin and her stealth destroyer continued hunting throughout the battlefield, appearing behind damaged enemy ships and finishing them off with precisely aimed torpedo strikes. Her crew had developed a routine where they would materialize just long enough to confirm their target was destroyed, then vanish again to search for the next victim. The Seoul Sharks fighter squadron, led by Commander Song Hae, conducted strafing runs against enemy vessels that were trying to escape toward the outer planets. Their plasma cannons could penetrate Krallick's armor. At close range, while their speed and maneuverability made them nearly impossible to hit, with return fire as the battle entered its final phase, the few surviving Krallick's ships attempted to flee toward hyperspace jump points, but human forces had anticipated this move. Long-range patrol boats were waiting at every possible escape route, armed with missiles that could disable enemy engines before they could reach minimum safe distance for hyperspace travel. The massacre continued until Krallick's vessels remained operational in the Altair system. Over 4,000 enemy ships had been destroyed, while human losses numbered only 30 vessels. The proportional victory was even more overwhelming than the first battle at Vega and sent a clear message to every hostile species in the galaxy. Admiral Bang's sacrifice had become the stuff of legend, as news of his heroic death spread throughout the human fleet. His willingness to give his own life to ensure victory embodied the spirit that had made humanity so dangerous to its enemies. They would fight to the death rather than allow evil to triumph over innocent people. The surviving colonists on Altair planets emerged from their shelters to find the sky filled with burning debris from enemy ships. For the second time in a week, human forces had liberated an entire star system while suffering minimal casualties. The impossible was becoming routine, as Earth technology proved superior to anything the galaxy had ever produced. Rescue operations began on the liberated worlds. Messages of gratitude poured in from species throughout known space. Everyone had heard about the second great victory, and many were beginning to believe that humanity might actually be able to defeat the entire Krallick's empire, despite being outnumbered by thousands to one. The age of alien dominance was ending, and the age of human protection was beginning. No species would ever again have to face conquest alone, because Earth would be there too, help them fight for their freedom. The galaxy was learning what happened when peaceful people decided they had endured enough injustice. 3 days after the massacre at Vega system, the Krallick's empire launched the largest military operation in their history. 5,000 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation above the Altair system, where human forces were in the process of liberating another conquered world. The alien high command had studied every piece of battle data from the previous engagement and believed they finally understood how to defeat these mysterious humans. Fleet Admiral Bang Shi-hyuk watched calmly from the bridge of his flagship Spirit of Incheon as enemy vessels filled the space around Altair like a swarm of angry insects. His human fleet numbered only 400 ships, but each one carried the most advanced weapons and defensive systems that Earth science could produce. The Admiral had spent the last 3 days preparing for exactly this kind of massive counterattack. The Krallics came out of hyperspace in a formation that had never been defeated in over 2 centuries of galactic warfare. Their massive dreadnoughts formed the center of a wall of metal and energy that stretched across millions of kilometers. Smaller support vessels created protective screens around the larger ships, while fast attack craft buzzed around the edges like deadly wasps. Their commanding admiral was Zek Therian, the most successful military leader in Krallick's history. He had conquered 47 star systems and destroyed the fleets of dozens of different species. His tactical genius was legendary throughout the galaxy, and he had never lost a single battle in over 50 years of warfare. Admiral Therian felt confident as he surveyed the human fleet through his command center displays. The enemy ships looked small and fragile. Compared to his mighty dreadnoughts, he had brought enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems, and he intended to use every bit of it to crush these upstart humans once and for all. The alien battle plan was simple but overwhelming. Advance in a solid wall of ships that no enemy could penetrate. Use superior numbers to surround and destroy the human fleet piece by piece. Show the galaxy that the Krallick's empire was still the dominant military force in known space. The plan had worked against every previous opponent, and Tharion saw no reason why it should fail now. But Admiral Bang had studied the enemy formations and identified a critical weakness. The Kralliks were thinking in terms of traditional space warfare, where larger fleets always defeated smaller ones. They had no experience fighting opponents who could appear and disappear at will, or who used tactics that had never been seen before in galactic combat. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, Bang ordered his fleet to scatter in all directions. Human ships broke formation and fled toward the asteroid belt that surrounded the inner planets. The movement looked like panic to Krallick's observers, who began to smile as they watched their enemies apparently running away. In terror, the alien admiral gave orders for his fleet to pursue and destroy the fleeing humans. His massive formation began to break apart as individual squadrons chased after different groups of scattered human vessels. This was exactly what Tharion wanted to happen. He would hunt down the cowardly humans, one small group at a time until none remained alive. For 20 minutes, the chase continued with Krallick's ships pursuing their targets deeper into the asteroid field. The aliens were so focused on catching the fleeing humans that they failed to notice how perfectly coordinated the retreat appeared to be. Every human ship seemed to know exactly where to go, even though they were no longer in communication with each other. Commander Song Heian led her fighter squadron called the Soul Sharks in a series of hit-and-run attacks against the pursuing Krallick's vessels. Her pilots would appear from behind asteroids, launch devastating missile strikes, and then vanish again before the enemy could respond. The aliens found themselves chasing shadows while taking constant damage from an opponent they could barely see. The Soul Sharks had trained for years in exactly this kind of combat, using asteroids and debris fields to mask their approach and create confusion among enemy forces. Each pilot had destroyed at least a dozen alien fighters in previous battles, and their reputation for deadly accuracy was already spreading throughout both fleets. Admiral Tharion began to feel the first stirrings of doubt as his pursuit forces reported increasing casualties. The humans were not behaving like any enemy he had faced before. Instead of running away in panic, they seemed to be drawing his ships into some kind of elaborate trap. But it was too late to change tactics now without losing face in front of his own officers. The trap was sprung exactly 30 minutes after the chase began. Human ships that had seemed to be fleeing in terror suddenly appeared behind the scattered Krallick's formation. They had used the asteroid belt to mask their movements and reposition themselves for a devastating surprise attack. The hunters had become the hunted, and they were about to learn why humanity had never lost a war plasma beams. And quantum torpedoes streaked across space from every direction as 400 human ships opened fire simultaneously. The perfect Krallick's formation that had looked so impressive just an hour before was now scattered and vulnerable with individual squadrons isolated and unable to support each other. Admiral Bang watched with satisfaction as his carefully planned ambush unfolded exactly as he had envisioned. Enemy ships that had been chasing his forces were now being destroyed by concentrated fire from multiple directions. The Kralliks found themselves caught in crossfires with nowhere to run and no way to coordinate their defense. The space around Altair system became a blazing battlefield as the largest engagement in galactic history began in earnest. Ships exploded like fireworks, creating new obstacles for the surviving vessels to navigate around. Debris fields expanded rapidly as both sides took casualties, but the humans were clearly winning the exchange, Admiral Tharion realized. Too late that he had been completely outmaneuvered by an enemy who understood space warfare better than any opponent he had ever faced. The humans had turned his own superior numbers against him by forcing his fleet to spread out and become vulnerable, to attack from unexpected directions. The battle that was supposed to restore Krallick's dominance was turning into another humiliating defeat, and this time, the entire galaxy would be watching to see how the mighty empire fell to a species they had never heard of just 1 week before. News of the human victory at Vega traveled faster than light across every inhabited system in the galaxy. Within hours of the battle-ending quantum communication networks carried the impossible story to billions of beings on thousands of worlds. The Kralix Empire, which had seemed undefeatable for over 2 centuries, had been crushed by a species that most aliens had never even heard of, Dr. Han. So Young worked frantically in the communications center aboard the flagship Soul Pride as messages poured in from every corner of known space. Her translation computers could barely keep up with the flood of incoming transmissions in hundreds of different alien languages. Every species in the galaxy wanted to know the same things. Who were these? Humans. Where had they come from? How had they destroyed the mighty Kralix fleet so easily? The first messages came from the Zentari Federation, whose blue-skinned leaders had been fighting a losing war against Kralix expansion for over 50 years. Their desperate plea for help was written in formal diplomatic language, but the fear and hope in their words was unmistakable. They offered vast amounts of rare minerals and advanced technology in exchange for human protection. Close behind came frantic communications from the Melox Republic, a collection of insect-like creatures whose hive worlds had been under constant threat of invasion. Their message was simpler but more direct. They would serve humanity forever if human ships would defend their colonies from alien attack. Their entire civilization was ready to become a protectorate of Earth Dr. Han. So Young found herself overwhelmed by the variety and urgency of the communications. Some species offered military alliances, while others promised trade agreements that would make Earth the richest planet in the galaxy. A few messages contained warnings about even more dangerous enemies lurking in the unexplored regions of deep space. General Shin Dong-wook stood in the war room studying 3-dimensional maps of Kralix territory that stretched across 40 star systems. Intelligence reports gathered over decades showed that the alien empire controlled hundreds of worlds and commanded armies numbering in the billions. But their space fleet had been the backbone of their power, and now that backbone was broken. The general noted with satisfaction that most Kralix forces were scattered across their vast territory without any central coordination. The destruction of their main battle fleet at Vega had created a power vacuum that would take months or even years to fill. This gave humanity a precious window of opportunity to strike again before the enemy could adapt to their new tactics. Major Kwon Mi-kyung piloted her stealth reconnaissance fighter deep into enemy-controlled space, gathering intelligence about remaining Kralix defenses and military installations. What she discovered was both encouraging and troubling. The aliens had massive ground, armies, but they relied heavily on their space fleet for transportation and fire support. Without their ships, these forces were essentially trapped on their garrison worlds. However, her long-range sensors also detected something more disturbing. Some Kralix worlds were receiving visits from ships that did not match any known alien designs. These mysterious vessels seemed to be bringing supplies and reinforcements, suggesting that the Empire had allies that humanity knew nothing about. The war might be far from over, even if the Kralix themselves were defeated. Back on Earth, President Ahn Jun-seok addressed an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. The revelation that humanity was no longer alone in the universe had shocked every nation on the planet. But the successful battle at Vega had proven that Earth technology could compete with anything the galaxy had to offer. The president explained that human civilization had been secretly monitoring alien communications for over a century, learning about galactic politics and military technology while remaining hidden from detection. Earth scientists had used this information to develop weapons and defensive systems specifically designed to counter alien threats. Now that humanity had revealed itself to the galaxy, there could be no going back. The Kralix would certainly attempt revenge, and other hostile species might see Earth as a threat that needed to be eliminated. The only path forward was to continue the campaign until every peaceful world was free from the threat of alien conquest. Meanwhile, on the outer edges of Kralix, space emergency meetings were being held on the Empire capital world. The few survivors from the Vega battle had managed to send warning messages to their high command, but their reports seemed too incredible to believe. How could 800 warships be destroyed in minutes by a species that had never been seen before? Kralix military analysts worked around the clock studying every scrap of sensor data from the battle, trying to understand how their invincible fleet had been annihilated. The recordings showed human ships appearing from nowhere, firing weapons of unknown design and vanishing again before counterattacks could be launched. The alien high command faced a terrible choice. They could try to negotiate with these mysterious humans, or they could gather every remaining ship and attempt one final massive assault. Either option carried enormous risks if they chose. Diplomacy, they might be seen as weak by other species in the galaxy. If they chose war, they might lose everything they had built over centuries of conquest. On liberated worlds throughout the Vega system, grateful colonists worked day and night to repair the damage caused by months of Kralix occupation. They sent thank you messages to the human fleet, along with detailed information about other worlds still under alien control. Every species that had been freed wanted to help humanity continue its campaign of liberation. The psychological impact of the human victory was spreading faster than any military advance could have achieved. Kralix garrison forces on dozens of worlds were reporting increased resistance from local populations who had heard about the defeat at Vega. Alien morale was collapsing. As word spread that the Empire was no longer invincible, Admiral Kim Tae-ho reviewed intelligence reports showing Kralix forces withdrawing from frontier worlds and consolidating around their core systems. The enemy was preparing for a defensive war, but their strategy was flawed. They were thinking in terms of traditional galactic warfare, while humanity had already moved beyond such limitations. The age of human expansion was beginning, and nothing would ever be the same. The galaxy was learning that when peaceful people were pushed too far, they could become the most dangerous enemy of all. The space around the 3 planets of the Vega system turned into a blazing inferno as 200 human warships opened fire at exactly the same moment. Thousands of plasma beams cut through the darkness like bright orange lightning, while quantum torpedoes streaked toward their targets with deadly precision. The Kralix fleet, caught completely unprepared, began exploding in brilliant flashes of light that could be seen from the planet's surface far below. Lieutenant Choi Yeon-woo gripped the controls of her fighter craft as she watched enemy battleships 3 times larger than her entire squadron simply vanish in balls of superheated gas. Her small ship shook from the shock waves of massive explosions happening all around her. The human weapons had been designed specifically to counter Kralix technology, and they worked even better than anyone had hoped. Each plasma beam that hit an enemy ship burned through their supposedly invincible armor like a hot knife through butter. The aliens had spent centuries perfecting their defenses against the weapons used by other galactic species, but they had never encountered anything like human firepower. Their shields flickered and died within seconds of being hit. Captain Nam Bo Ra commanded the destroyer Busan Thunder as it led the assault on the enemy left flank. Her ship was much smaller than the Kralix dreadnoughts, but it moved with the speed and grace of a hunting cat, dodging between enemy fire while delivering devastating counterattacks. Her crew worked with mechanical precision, loading, firing, and reloading their weapons without pause. The bridge of Busan Thunder was filled with the sounds of successful hits as enemy ships broke apart under their bombardment. Sergeant O.J. Sung operated the main plasma cannon with deadly accuracy. Every shot he fired found its target, and every target died in spectacular explosions. His years of training had prepared him for this moment, and he was not going to waste a single opportunity. The Kralix tried desperately to respond to the sudden attack, but their communication systems were being jammed by human electronic warfare specialists. Commander Ryu Hae-jin worked from the stealth ship Ghost of Soul, sending out powerful signals that made enemy computers think their own weapons were malfunctioning. Kralik ships began firing randomly in all directions, often hitting their own allies in the confusion. Enemy vessels that had been in perfect formation just minutes before were now scattered across space like leaves in a hurricane. Some tried to retreat toward the outer planets, while others attempted to group together for a coordinated defense. But the humans had planned for every possible response and had counter measures ready for each one. Down on the third planet, the surviving colonists looked up at the sky in amazement and terror. The alien ships that had been raining death on their world were now falling like burning meteors. Some crashed into the ocean, sending up massive clouds of steam that could be seen from orbit. Others broke apart in the atmosphere, creating brilliant light shows that illuminated the night sky. Children who had been hiding in underground shelters emerged to watch the battle. Overhead, their parents wept with joy as they realized that someone had finally come to save them. The nightmare of Kralik's occupation was ending right before their eyes as ship after ship exploded in the darkness. Above, Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood calmly on his command bridge, watching the battle reports flow in from all sectors. His tactical display showed green dots representing human ships easily outmaneuvering and destroying red dots that marked enemy vessels. The numbers were even better than his most optimistic projections had predicted. In just 12 minutes of combat, his fleet had destroyed over 300 Kralik's warships while suffering 0 casualties. The enemy weapons could not penetrate human shields, and their slow, heavy vessels could not match the speed and agility of Earth-built fighters and destroyers. The Kraliks were not just losing, they were being completely annihilated. Some enemy captains tried to surrender, but their communication systems were so badly damaged by human jamming that they could not send clear signals. Others attempted to ram human ships in desperate suicide attacks, but even these final acts of defiance failed as human vessels simply moved out of the way. Lieutenant Choi Yeon-woo led her fighter squadron in a strafing run against a damaged Kralik's cruiser. Her plasma cannons tore long gashes in the enemy hull, while her wingmen targeted the ship engines and weapons systems. Within minutes, the once mighty warship was nothing more than drifting scrap metal. The battle was turning into a massacre as human forces demonstrated their overwhelming technological superiority. Every aspect of their military had been designed with one goal in mind: the total destruction of any enemy that threatened peaceful civilizations. Their ships were faster, their weapons were stronger, and their tactics were more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Commander Lee Min-ho coordinated the final phase of the attack, as the remaining Kralik ships attempted to flee toward the edge of the star system. Human vessels pursued them relentlessly, ensuring that none would escape to warn other parts of the alien empire. The few enemy ships that reached hyperspace were tracked and destroyed before they could jump to safety, as the last Kralik's vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The space around Vega system fell silent for the first time in months. The only sounds were the cheers of liberated colonists on the planets below, and the quiet hum of human ship engines as they began salvage operations. Admiral Kim Tae-ho smiled with satisfaction as he reviewed the final battle statistics. Over 800 enemy ships destroyed in under 20 minutes with no human losses. The Kralik's empire had just suffered the worst military defeat in their long history of conquest, and they did not even know it yet. News of this victory would spread across the galaxy faster than light as surviving colonists sent messages to their families and friends on other worlds. Everyone would learn that humanity had arrived and that the age of alien terror was finally coming to an end. The human fleet regrouped in orbit around the liberated planets, their black hulls now gleaming with pride. Instead of hiding in shadows, they had proven that Earth technology and human courage could overcome any enemy, no matter how large or powerful. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when peaceful people were pushed too far. The darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions as Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood quietly on the command bridge of his massive warship, Seoul Pride. His eyes were fixed on the distant stars that sparkled like tiny diamonds against the black void. Behind him, dozens of officers worked at their control panels, speaking in whispers so quiet that even the ship computers could barely hear them. 200 human warships moved through the empty space like silent ghosts. Each ship was painted, deep black to blend with the darkness around them. No lights blinked on their hulls, no radio signals passed between them. The entire fleet had been traveling in complete silence for 3 long months, approaching their target with the patience of hunters stalking dangerous prey. Captain Park. Da-yoon walked slowly across the bridge toward her admiral. Her boots made soft padding sounds on the metal floor, but even these small noises seemed too loud in the tense atmosphere. She carried a data pad filled with intelligence reports about their enemy. The information was not good. The Kralix Empire had been destroying peaceful worlds for years, turning entire planets into burning wastelands. Park Da-yoon stopped beside her admiral and held out the data pad. Kim Tae-ho took it without looking away from the viewport. His weathered face showed no emotion as he read the latest reports. 800 Kralix warships were spread across 3 planets in the Vega system. Each enemy ship was twice the size of the largest human vessel and carried weapons that could melt through any known armor in seconds. The Kralix had a simple but terrifying method of conquest. They would appear suddenly above a peaceful world, demand immediate surrender, and then begin destroying everything whether the people gave up or not. Their massive ships would rain down energy beams from orbit, turning cities into lakes of melted glass. Billions of innocent people had died under their brutal attacks. But today, that would change. Kim Tae-ho handed the datapad back to his captain and smiled for the first time in months. The Kralix thought they were the strongest force in the galaxy. They believed no one could challenge their mighty fleet. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Human technology was different from anything other species had developed. While aliens focused on building bigger ships with more powerful weapons, humans had learned the value of stealth and surprise. Years of wars on, Earth had taught them that the best battle was one where the enemy never saw death coming. Commander Lee Min-ho approached from the weapons control station. His voice was barely above a whisper as he reported that all ships were ready for combat. Every human vessel carried experimental plasma cannons that could punch through the thickest alien armor like it was paper. Their quantum torpedoes could track enemy ships across vast distances and explode with the force of small stars. The human fleet had trained for this mission for over a year, learning to fight together without speaking a single word. They developed hand signals and light patterns that could coordinate complex attacks across hundreds of ships. Their pilots practiced, flying in perfect formation while maintaining complete radio silence. Down on the 3rd planet, the Kralix were continuing their assault on the remaining defenders. The aliens showed no mercy to anyone who resisted their rule. Their energy weapons turned entire mountain ranges into puddles of molten rock. Cities that had stood for thousands of years disappeared in minutes, leaving nothing but smoking craters where millions of people once lived. Kim Tae-ho watched as more Kralix ships joined the bombardment. The aliens were enjoying themselves, taking their time to cause maximum destruction. They wanted other worlds to see what happened to those who dared fight back against their empire. Each explosion on the planet's surface sent a message of terror across the galaxy. The human admiral checked his watch. Exactly 60 more seconds until the attack would begin. His fleet was positioned perfectly with ships surrounding the enemy from every direction. The Kralix sensors still showed nothing. Their technology could not detect the advanced stealth systems that made human ships invisible to all known scanning methods. Captain Park Da-yoon moved to her battle station. Her hands were steady as she prepared to give orders to her crew. She had been fighting aliens for 10 years, ever since they destroyed her home colony on the Outer Rim. Her parents and 2 brothers had died in that attack. Now she would finally have her revenge all across the human fleet. Similar scenes were playing out. Thousands of men and women took their positions at weapons consoles, navigation stations, and communication centers. Many of them had lost family members to alien attacks. All of them had trained their entire adult lives for this single moment when humanity would announce its presence to the galaxy. The Kraliks continued their bombardment, completely unaware that death was approaching from above. Their commanders were relaxed, thinking about the next world they would conquer after finishing with this one. Some were already planning victory celebrations that would never happen. Commander Lee Min-ho began the final countdown, his voice carried to every station on the bridge. 10 seconds, 9 seconds, 8 seconds. The tension in the air was so thick it could be cut with a knife. 7 seconds, 6 seconds, 5 seconds. Every human heart beat faster as the moment of truth approached. 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds. Kim Tae-ho raised his hand, ready to give the signal that would change galactic history forever. 1 second. The Admiral brought his hand down sharply, and the greatest space battle ever fought began. At exactly the same moment, 200 human warships dropped their stealth shields and became visible. The darkness of space suddenly blazed with light as plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes streaked toward their targets. The Kraliks fleet, which had been lazily orbiting the planet, began exploding before their sensors could even register the incoming attack. First enemy ships to die were the massive dreadnoughts that the aliens thought were invincible. Human weapons tore through their shields and armor like they were made of paper. Explosions rippled across alien hulls as internal systems overloaded, and reactors went critical. Proud Kraliks warships that had terrorized the galaxy for decades became expanding clouds of superheated gas in seconds. Kim Tae-ho watched with satisfaction as his plan unfolded perfectly. The element of surprise was complete. The enemy had no time to coordinate their defenses or call for reinforcements. They were dying so fast that many ships exploded before their crews could even sound battle alarms. The age of Kraliks dominance was ending, and the age of humanity was about to begin. The galaxy would never be the same after this day. 6 months after the great battle at Altair System, the galaxy was completely transformed. The mighty Kraliks Empire that had ruled through fear for over 2 centuries had collapsed completely. Their surviving forces either surrendered to human fleets or were hunted down by newly liberated species seeking revenge for centuries of oppression. Dozens of civilizations that had lived as slaves were now free, and they all looked to humanity as their protectors. Ambassador Park Chan-wook worked 18 hours a day at the new Galactic Council headquarters on Kepler Station. Representatives from over 200 different species had gathered to establish a government based on freedom trade and mutual defense instead of conquest and slavery. The humans had insisted from the beginning that they did not want to rule the galaxy. They simply wanted to ensure that no species would ever again face the kind of tyranny the Kraliks had imposed. The new constitution that emerged from months of careful negotiation guaranteed basic rights to all intelligent beings regardless of their planet of origin or physical form. Every species would have representation in the council based on their population, and contribution to galactic civilization trade would be free between all member worlds, and any attempt to conquer or enslave another species would result in immediate military intervention by the combined fleets. Earth shipyards worked around the clock to build vessels for both human crews and alien allies who wanted to learn from humanity military expertise. The Seoul Academy established branch schools on dozens of worlds, training officers from every species in the tactics and strategies that had defeated the Empire young aliens. Studied alongside human cadets, learning that courage and intelligence mattered more than size or natural weapons. Admiral Kim Tae-ho, now promoted to Supreme Fleet Commander, oversaw the construction of defense bases throughout the galaxy. Human technology was shared freely with allied species, while Earth engineers helped them upgrade their own ships and weapons systems. The goal was to create a galaxy where every world could defend itself, instead of relying on others for protection. Captain John Mi-young commanded one of the exploration fleets that mapped regions of space that had been forbidden to other species for centuries. The collapse of the Krallics had opened vast areas that contained ancient ruins, mysterious artifacts and evidence of civilizations that had existed long before any current species had developed spaceflight. Some discoveries were wonderful, while others suggested that even greater threats might exist in the unexplored regions beyond known space. The liberated worlds celebrated their freedom with festivals that lasted for weeks. Children who had grown up hiding in underground shelters could finally play outside without fear of alien attack. Trade ships that had not dared to travel certain routes for decades began carrying goods between systems that had been isolated for generations. On-Earth monuments were built in every major city to honor the heroes who had died freeing the galaxy. Names like Kim Tae-ho Park, Da-yun Bang-shi-hyuk, and thousands of others were carved in stone so that future generations would remember the price of freedom. Streets were renamed after famous battles and schools taught children about the war that had changed everything. President An Jun-seok addressed the United Nations for the final time as leader of a single planet. Earth was no longer an isolated world, but the capital of a galactic civilization that spanned thousands of star systems. The responsibility was enormous, but humanity had proven it could rise to meet any challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. The former Krallic territories were divided among the species that had been enslaved there, with human peacekeeping forces ensuring smooth transitions to self-government. Some worlds chose to join the new Galactic Council immediately, while others preferred to remain independent as long as they agreed not to attack their neighbors. Dr. Han So-young established the Galactic Communication Network, which allowed instant translation between hundreds of languages and made trade and diplomacy possible on a scale never before imagined. Species that had been enemies for millennia discovered they had more in common than they had differences when language barriers were removed. Commander Song Hae retired from active military service to become an instructor at the new Flight Training Academy. Her Soul Shark Squadron became the model for fighter tactics taught throughout the galaxy, and her students went on to form the core of the new multi-species defense force that protected peaceful worlds from any remaining threats. The few surviving Krallic leaders who had not been killed during the collapse of their empire were brought to trial for crimes against entire civilizations. The evidence of their atrocities filled libraries, while the testimonies of their victims lasted for months. Some were sentenced to prison, while others were executed, but all faced justice for the billions they had killed. Trade flourished as species that had been isolated for centuries began sharing their knowledge and resources. The galaxy became richer and more prosperous than ever before, as scientific discoveries spread rapidly between worlds that had once been enemies. New technologies emerged from the combination of human engineering with alien science, creating possibilities that neither could have achieved alone. Children on 1,000 worlds went to sleep at night without fear of invasion or conquest. Parents could plan for the future knowing that their families would be safe from the kind of systematic oppression that had once seemed inevitable. The human fleet patrolled the space lanes with their mere presence enough to deter anyone who might think of returning to the old ways. The age of human expansion had begun, but it was an expansion of protection rather than conquest. Earth vessels carried doctors, teachers, and engineers to distant worlds rather than soldiers and weapons humanity had learned from watching. The Krallics, that power without compassion led only to destruction and loneliness. As the first year of the new galactic order came to an end, Ambassador Park Chan-wook reflected on how much had changed, a species that had been unknown just months. before now served as the foundation of peace and prosperity for billions of beings across thousands of worlds. The galaxy would never be the same, and everyone agreed that the change had been for the better. The future stretched ahead full of possibilities that no one could have imagined when humanity first emerged from the shadows to challenge an empire that seemed invincible. Sometimes the greatest victories came not from the strongest weapons, but from the courage to fight for what was right. No matter what the odds against success might be.